the bed bug trap. For demonstration purposes, let's say that this is a bed, and in this bed you find bed bugs. Bed bugs might be in the seam of the mattress, underneath the sheet, underneath the mattress, or in the box spring, in the legs, anywhere around the bed. And they crawl underneath the sheet until they get to you, and then they feed and they go back out and hide again. When that happens, what you do, take away the sheets, the bugs are still there, and encase them, just like you would do with any other vermin. Any bed bugs which are underneath this piece of plastic will be stuck and will not be able to bite you. So once it's on the bed, you can sleep on top of it and no bed bugs can get to you. You won't get any bites and you can use it right away. The only thing that I suggest is that you tie it down, around the bed to hold it in place. And then you can use it just like before with your sheets, as long as they do not touch the floor or the walls, so that any bed bugs that might be on the wall will not be able to have access if you don't make a bridge where they can go directly from either the wall to the sheet or from the floor up. If it touches down the floor, bed bugs will be able to get up. So always make sure that you have a gap here and on the side where the walls are, so it doesn't touch here. Leave a space. Underneath the bed, you will want to put a bed bug trap. A CO2 generator and a holder of some kind. Could be a bowl, it could be, in this case, it's a 35mm film container with a piece of cloth glued on the outside and talcum powder in the inside to make it slippery. The tube goes into this and bed bugs will be attracted to the CO2 which overflows to the floor. They will follow that, easily climb up and fall in, never to get out again. And basically that's what a bed bug trap is. This works and catches all bed bugs. Bed bugs of all sizes, adults, young ones, nymphs, but these ones here, these ones are the babies. It catches the babies as soon as they hatch. They won't even bite once. They all go in the trap. They all go in here. This is the way to get bed bug free. Get rid of them forever. A trap can be made if you follow the recipe, and we'll end up would probably look like this. You have the CO2 generator, which is a 2-liter bottle with a hole in the cap and covered with a sheet of plastic, holding it down with anything, a string, tape. In this case, I use a simple elastic band. This goes into a soup bowl with a skirt, and it's easy for the bedbugs to climb up, and once they reach the edge, they fall into it. This is covered with talcum powder or baby powder, and this makes the most efficient and the least expensive bedbug trap in the world. The same trap, you can replace the plastic sheet with a tubing. You can replace the plastic sheet here with a tubing. The tubing goes into the bowl. So the CO2 is produced by the bottle, goes down the tube, fills the bowl, overflows to the floor, and from there will attract bed bugs which will easily climb up and fall into the trap. To make it look better, you can cover it up with a sock, from which I cut off the toe and I just simply slip it over like so. And then it looks better than plastic, but this is the basic one. You can have two of them, and it will take care of a room if you put them underneath the bed. Now, if there's not enough space underneath the bed, instead of a 2-liter bottle, you can use 4 smaller ones for the same 2-liter. This can go in a soup bowl, but this cannot. So you can make your own with a pizza box, from which you measure the space taken by a bottle, cut it out, take it out, and put a piece of plastic straight right on it. Put bottles back in and glue it to the outside, and then after that put a skirt or some cloth around it. So strap with four or 500 millimeters bottles will look like this. This is the same trap, just a different way of doing it. The trap can also look like this. It's a juice jar and a cup. With a piece of cloth glued at the back, and the tubing goes right over the cup. Again, CO2 will flow down, will be produced by the bottle, will go into the tubing and down and fill the cup. It will overflow it and run down to the floor. bed bugs will be attracted to the CO2 and will easily climb up and fall into it, never to come out again. This is a different look, but it is the same trap. This is another trap. Tupperware 2 liter with a tube. CO2 is produced here, fills the bowl, overflows, attracts the bed bugs, go right into it, and that's it, no more bed bugs. This is also a trap. It's a container that you can find in kitchen, so I don't know, something from household products. And it's a cup, it's got a tubing, and it's a cup with a skirt, just a little cup, egg cup, for boiled eggs. Another bed bug trap, made from sugar, yeast, and water. Of course, it's handy to have talcum powder and glue, nail polish. But this is glue. Elastic band, there are some tubing, cloth, plastic, this garbage bag, but for leaves, the orange one. They're big. You can tape them together to make a large sheet of plastic that can be found for $1, 12 feet by 9 feet to cover the bed. Or you can make your own with plastic. Any plastic bag will do. So you will end up with sorry, with your bed covered with plastic and a CO2 trap underneath it. And this will take care of all the bed bugs, will get rid of all of them. Here, need a little cup here. 2 weeks, no more bed bugs. Thank you very much. Cheers. Scottish. That's it.
Today, I'll show you why any planted tank, dare I say, needs CO2. Stay tuned for Science Alliance. Hey folks, Nick Mock 007 here for the very first episode of Science Alliance. Now, as we hinted in the teaser video, I will present one side of an issue, but to see the other side and actually get a balanced view, you gotta go check out my bud Cam's channel. There's the link, but I'll also put it in the description. Once you watch these two videos, you make up your mind. So remember, my job today is to convince you to use CO2, or carbon dioxide, in your tank, not to present a full view of the topic, so let's keep that in mind. If you have any ideas that you'd like to see us cover in future episodes, email us. I'll put a link for our email in the description below. Also, we set up a poll. We thought it would be neat to see what we're all doing. So it's a real short, simple poll, but it'll give us a glimpse into who's actually using CO2. Then we can all see the results. All right, on to the debate. So if this is your first day on planet Earth, let me first welcome you. You must have heard that all life on Earth is structured around carbon, what people usually say is carbon-based life forms. It's the same reason why all doctors have to take orgo or organic chemistry. It's just a fancy way of saying the study of matter that contains carbon atoms. Now, plants, they're made up of 40 to 50% carbon. Now that's the dry weight of plants. Submerged aquarium of plants absorb carbon through a variety of means, but primarily through carbon dioxide, which of course, CO2, is dissolved in the water. All aquarium plants will benefit greatly from adding CO2 to the water. Now, let me say that again. All aquarium plants will benefit from adding CO2. But if you want to keep a heavily planted tank full of lush green growth with little or no algae, then I consider CO2 to be essential. But before we focus on CO2, let me also tell you that plants can meet their carbon needs by splitting carbon directly from carbonates in the water. Now, while that method is useful in the wild, it's not so desirable in our aquariums, because when plants draw on calcium carbonate in the water to meet their carbon needs, a process called biogenic decalcification, the water has less and less buffering capacity. Now, what that means is, without that buffering capacity, you can have big pH fluctuations. Eventually, the plants can even totally exhaust this carbon source. That's why adding CO2 is a much, much better option. All right, so I've told you plants are carbon-based life forms, and the best method to give them carbon is by adding CO2 to your tank. But the question is, what does a plant actually do with carbon? Well, carbon dioxide is used by plants in photosynthesis, or the conversion of water, carbon dioxide, and light into food or energy, simple carbohydrates, with oxygen as the byproduct. Okay, put simply, plants need CO2 to grow. Now, here's a simplified equation showing photosynthesis. Again, very simplified. Through this process, as you can see, plants capture energy from light, CO2, and water to produce glucose, and then they release oxygen. Okay, so in order for this essential process to occur within the cells of plants, there must be CO2 present. You can then think of it as the CO2 promotes growth, reproduction, and the prevention of disease in our plants. So now, there's plenty of CO2 in the atmosphere, on average 350 to 500 parts per million of carbon dioxide. Though this can vary based on a variety of things, altitude, whether you live in a city or not. So isn't that good enough? That's a lot of carbon dioxide. Well, no. In your tank, levels of CO2 are much, much closer to 6 parts per million, whereas the target of CO2 is actually 25 to 35 parts per million. Now, for both terrestrial and aquatic plants, increasing the concentrations of CO2 to 4 to 5 times those levels has been shown to promote faster growth, higher yield, stronger, healthier plants. Don't ask me too much about where I learned that. Hint, I got it on chat boards with growers living in Colorado and California. Anyways, though, on the flip side, low levels of CO2 have been shown to halt vigorous growth, even when all other conditions are ideal. Okay, so it's abundantly clear that adding CO2 promotes unrivaled plant growth. This is, of course, is why we're so limited in what types of plants we can grow in low light conditions. Now, some plants developed in nature to grow under low light conditions. And of course, everyone knows that under low light conditions, these certain plants, things like crypts, can do okay without added CO2. So it's true that there's normally enough CO2 for these less demanding plants to grow successfully without CO2 addition. But if you're interested in growing a wide range of plants with different colors, textures, sizes, then you'll have to consider higher light. And as soon as you increase light levels, then the plants may grow well for a period until they consume the little CO2 that is available. But then they'll be limited by a lack of CO2. Not only will your plant stop growing, but then this will lead to other problems that running CO2 in your tanks can help you avoid. This includes algae. Let me say that again, algae. Now, this is because light and excess nutrients your plants cannot use. So algae's biggest friend is lots of light, little or slow growing plants. Now, adding CO2 allows the plants to use the light and the nutrients available. In fact, sometimes aquarists often increase CO2 to around 40 parts per million because these higher levels can actually block the enzyme production in algae cells. But try not to think of plant growth in terms of a competition between higher plants and algae. An increase in CO2 availability means an increase in carbon, which means there's more growth and more health. Algae attacks when plants are unhealthy and recedes when plants are healthy. So increased CO2 generates healthier plants, which then eliminates the conditions in which algae tends to attack. Another benefit for many aquarists is that using CO2 reduces pH levels. This can often be beneficial to many species of tropical fish. In fact, the majority of freshwater fish that we keep originate from waters with soft and acidic water. Everything from tetras to discus and catfish. Now, a lot of people tell you that pH will swing when using CO2 with a solenoid. That means your CO2 is on during the day and off at night. But here's something that people don't tell you. pH will swing if you don't add CO2 to your tank. I'm going to put up a log right now. This was of a 180 liter aquarium where the pH goes from 7.35 to almost 8 during the daytime. During the photo period, the plants pick up CO2 from water, which makes the pH rise. But then the other half is that the water is more oxygenated, and oxygen is a base, so that also causes pH to rise. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much time looking at that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. It is important to remember that whether you use supplemental CO2 or not, the amount of light, CO2, and available nutrients must be in equilibrium. In fact, I would actually tell you that it's easier to balance these things if you are supplementing with CO2. Let me explain. So, in low-tech setups and high-tech setups alike, lighting and nutrients can be controlled equally well. You can raise or lower the light, you can add more fertilizers, but only when you're adding CO2 can you actually control CO2 by increasing or decreasing this rate. Thus, balancing your tank is actually easier since you can control each one of these variables individually. Now, people will often tell you that CO2 can be dangerous to your fish. So let me say that is true, but, and this is a big one here, so can everything else you add to your tank. It is important to think of supplemental CO2 as an additive, just like fertilizers, dechlorinators, buffers, medications, or even fish food. All of these things can create lethal conditions in your tank when they're added in excess. CO2 is no different. It has to be used within specific parameters to ensure the safety of your tank's inhabitants, but it's just like those other things. So now you should be asking yourself, not whether, but how should I be adding CO2 to my tank? Now, I'm only going to cover these very, very briefly here to point out a few specific things relevant to today's conversation. So you have two main methods. You have your pressurized and non-pressurized, which is often referred to as DIY CO2. All right, let's start with the pressurized. This is by far the most reliable and controllable method of CO2 enrichment. This includes bigger tanks, the 2.5s, 5s, 10s, 20 pounds, and up. Okay, but this can also include paintball canisters. These are much smaller and cheaper, so remember that point. The advantages are clear. You get very, very fine control of CO2 using these regulators, and it's really easy to automate. Once you have it set up, it's almost set and forget. And with a big enough tank, you only have to refill it once or twice a year. Pretty easy. Now, the second method harnesses fermentation and is usually called DIY CO2. Any home brewer will tell you that CO2 is a byproduct of fermentation. It is the gas found in bubbly alcoholic beverages. A pound of sugar will ferment into approximately a pound of ethyl alcohol and half a pound of CO2. All you need are a couple of plastic containers like an old, 2-liter soft drink bottle and some airline tubing, some yeast, some sugar from the grocery store, and that's it. Now, the advantages of this system will speak to some of the criticisms of pressurized CO2. First off, it's easy to make. It's done with simple materials, don't really need any real skill, and it's very, very cheap. And it's quite easy to maintain. No real expertise is needed. It's just less intimidating than the pressurized setups. And there are no dangers associated with pressurized gas tanks in your home. Okay, so hopefully I've already convinced you to go set up a CO2 system for your tank. But remember, go check out the other half of this video on Cam's channel. Remember, I gave you a very one-sided presentation, though I agree with everything I said. And if you're actually considering setting up CO2, you got to know both sides of this issue. Remember, send us an email if you have topics you want us to cover, and just take a real quick second to vote in that poll. All of that stuff is in the description. And as always, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, but feel free to hit the dislike button if you feel I did a terrible job and I didn't convince you of anything. Now, I really do read and answer comments, so let us know what you think. And if you want to stay up to date with my channel, including the Science Alliance series, make sure you're subscribed to me, but also subscribe to Cam. All right, remember, CO2 is what makes beer, beer. See you in the next video.
Auf unserer Erde ändert sich ständig das Wetter. Beobachten wir in einer Region das Wetter über lange Zeit, so erkennen wir das Klima. Das Klima wird weltweit von der Sonne beeinflusst. Ihre Strahlen treffen auf die Erde, geben etwas Wärme ab und reflektieren wieder in den Weltraum. Ups, was ist denn das? In den letzten 100 Jahren wurde die Erde immer wärmer. Das Klima wandelt sich. Wie das? In unserer Atmosphäre gibt es ein natürlich vorkommendes Gas namens Kohlendioxid, auch CO2 genannt. Es besteht aus Kohlenstoff, das durch ein C verdeutlicht wird, und aus 2 Molekülen Sauerstoff. Die Abkürzung für Sauerstoff ist ein O, wie das englische Wort Oxygen. Pflanzen nehmen dieses Gas auf, benutzen den Kohlenstoff, um zu wachsen, und geben dabei den Sauerstoff frei. So entsteht die Luft, die wir atmen. Und so binden Bäume beim Wachsen eine große Menge des Kohlendioxids aus der Luft. In den tropischen Regenwäldern am Amazonas ist zum Beispiel so viel CO2 gespeichert, wie wir weltweit innerhalb von 15 Jahren freisetzen. Der Mensch produziert mit seinen Fabriken und Autos eine gewaltige Menge an CO2. Zwar binden die Pflanzen beim Wachsen weiterhin Kohlenstoff und geben Sauerstoff in die Luft, aber so schnell wie wir CO2 produzieren, können die Pflanzen gar nicht arbeiten. Zudem entstehen immer mehr Fabriken und Autos. Immer mehr Energie wird verbraucht und immer mehr Wälder werden vernichtet. Bäume werden gefällt und verbrannt. Dadurch wird auch das in ihnen gespeicherte CO2 zusätzlich freigesetzt. Und nun passiert Folgendes. Jahr für Jahr gelangt mehr CO2 in die Atmosphäre und reichert sich dort an. Diese angereicherte Schicht wird immer dicker und dicker. Und sie verhindert, dass die Sonnenstrahlen wieder in den Weltraum entweichen können. Die Wärme staut sich also unter dieser Schicht wie in einem Treibhaus. Dadurch steigt weltweit die Temperatur und das Klima verändert sich. Mit katastrophalen Folgen. Das Eis am Nord- und Südpol schmilzt. Der Meeresspiegel steigt. Es kommt zu schlimmen Überschwemmungen und woanders zu schlimmen Dürren. Wüsten breiten sich aus. Immer kräftigere Stürme zerstören ganze Städte. Ganze Lebensräume verschwinden. Viele Pflanzen und Tierarten sind bedroht. Und mit ihnen die Lebensgrundlage der Menschen. Aber noch ist es nicht zu spät. Noch können wir die Katastrophe stoppen. Wissenschaftler sagen, wir müssen dafür sorgen, dass der Temperaturanstieg durch den Klimawandel nicht mehr als 2 Grad beträgt. Was kannst du dafür tun? Du kannst dafür sorgen, dass nicht mehr so viel CO2 produziert wird. Spare Strom, nutze dein Fahrrad, kaufe regionale Produkte, die nicht die halbe Welt umrunden mussten, um zu dir zu gelangen, heize etwas weniger. Du weißt ja, dass Wälder viel CO2 binden. Hilf also mit, die Wälder zu schützen. Rette den Regenwald. Wie? Benutze Recyclingpapier, iss weniger Fleisch und möglichst nur Biofleisch. Sag Nein zu Alufolie und Getränkedosen. Und recycle dein altes Handy. Sammle Spenden und pflanze damit Bäume. Jeder Hektar neu gepflanzter Regenwald entzieht der Luft bis zu 29 Tonnen CO2 pro Jahr. Und mit jedem Baum schließt du eine Lücke, die bereits in den Regenwald gerissen wurde. Dadurch finden auch viele bedrohte Tierarten wieder einen Lebensraum. Ende gut, alles gut? Nur wenn du mithilfst. Klick dich ein unter www.overde.de.
Greetings, friends. This is Survival Doc. Today, I'd like to talk about carbon dioxide, particularly as it relates to long-term food storage and also storage of other survival supplies. Now, one of the ways that you prolong the life of food that you store is by removing the oxygen. And you do that by replacing the air that's in the bag or whatever storage container you're using with carbon dioxide. A lot of people don't think about this, but also oxygen is responsible for rust or corrosion of metal parts. So if you're putting away, or particularly if you're burying steel parts like firearms and ammunition, if you remove the oxygen from the containers that you're putting your metal parts in, you'll also inhibit the rust and corrosion. What I have here is a pressurized tank of carbon dioxide. Now, this is not something that I recommend you as a survivalist or prepper run out and buy. I do not recommend that because this is way too expensive and you could spend your money on much more reasonable items. I have this because I picked this up at an estate sale for $10, which was a bargain because this hose here by itself would cost more than $10. These valves and gauges here would cost probably $100. This was used for airbrush painting. And I have it because I just got a really good deal on it. If you happen to find a good deal on a carbon dioxide tank like this, great. But if not, the most practical way to replace the oxygen in your survival containers with carbon dioxide is to use dry ice. And what you do is you put a little piece of dry ice in your bucket. You don't seal it until the dry ice completely sublimates or completely dissipates. And you put the top on loosely, allow the dry ice to sublimate. All right, dry ice, as I'm going to demonstrate here, carbon dioxide is heavier than air, so what it does is it settles to the bottom of the container and it pushes the air, which includes the oxygen, out of the container. Once the dry ice is completely sublimated, then you seal your bucket. But because carbon dioxide is heavier, it will remain in the bucket, and I'm going to demonstrate here how that occurs. What I have here is an ordinary glass pitcher, an ordinary glass jar, a candle, and this little container I'm going to be using as a platform in here so the candle is not sitting on the bottom. And I have tongs so that I can lift the candle without burning my hand. And of course I have my hose for the carbon dioxide. Okay, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to fill this container with carbon dioxide. All right, again, carbon dioxide is heavier than air, so you can imagine that I'm putting a liquid in here like water, and this is filling up with carbon dioxide. And then when I stop at the carbon dioxide, as long as you don't move it around too much, and as long as there's no draft or breeze in here, the carbon dioxide will remain in the container. Okay, I'm going to turn off my hose here. I'm going to light my candle. Put the candle in the jar. And now I'm going to pour the carbon dioxide in the jar and extinguish the candle. And there you have it. Demonstrating carbon dioxide is heavier than air. And that is the reason that when you're filling your storage container with carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide will remain in the bottom of the container unless it is disturbed too much. Now, I will point out that another way to remove the oxygen from your food storage container is to use oxygen absorbing packs. So carbon dioxide is just one method. Dry ice, which is solid carbon dioxide, is one practical method. Oxygen absorbing packs is another. This is Survival Doc, reminding you, be prepared or be prepared to be fleeced.